we are proud to launch Medika Talks, an exclusive healthcare-specific knowledge-sharing and conversation platform, powered by us to facilitate a deeper understanding of the entire healthcare domain, be it challenges, opportunities, past lessons or future endeavors. Our vision with this platform is to cover most important topics regarding the industry, and then gradually zoom out to create an entire knowledge warehouse. This knowledge management platform will be built on strong, tested and implementable opinions from esteemed experts of the industry. We will be conducting regular sessions in the form of webinars, expert talks sessions, CMEs, CXO meets and more where industry leaders rich in experience can share their diverse and deep knowledge for the benefit of the entire community. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you would find this interesting and insightful.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and please we welcome you to our first session of webinar engaging most of experts from the industry. This Medika Talks, the first webinar session organized exclusively from Medika Bazaar, being moderated by my colleague and dear friend Dr. Akash Rajpal. We have esteemed experts and panelists on the webinar today. The session is going to be moderated by Dr. Akash. I will just quickly introduce all the panelists in the webinar today and would request Akash to take it forward from here. So I have Dr. Girdhar Gyani, the Secretary General from AHPI, Association of Healthcare Providers of India. We have Dr. Vivek Desai, Founder and Managing Director for HOSMAC. Mr. Joy Chakraborty, Chief Operating Officer, Hinduja Hospital. Mr. Neeraj Lal, from Rainbow Children's Hospital. Dr. Prakash, I don't know, I cannot see Dr. Prakash here. Maybe he would join sometime soon.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, okay. Hi, sorry, I couldn't notice you. So Dr. Prakash, the Managing Director for Star Health Insurance Company. Mr. Harshad Thakur, Director, NIHFW. Professor Bijon Mishra, International Consumer Policy Expert. Hello, sir. Good afternoon. How are you?
Very good.
Mr. Deepak Bad, President, Association of Medical Consultants, and I have already introduced my colleague Dr. Akash Rajpal. So this is the first session where we are going to engage with all industry experts to understand how the COVID situation is going to change the healthcare industry post-COVID, in the post-COVID scenario. This will be a very engaging session where we would want our panelists to share their expert views and come to some kind of conclusive discussion wherein we understand as an expert advice the industry is going to change and what changes do we foresee from here. So over to you, Akash. I won't take much of the time because we are running already 4 to 5 minutes late.
Unmute, Akash.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So a warm welcome from the Medika Bazaar family to all the invited guests on Zoom. There's a larger family out there who is watching the Facebook live telecast of this particular webinar. This is a proud moment because such a talented team of panelists Now we're going to discuss a very prominent topic today, COVID situation. So I would like to begin first with the senior most, one of the seniors out here, Girdhar Gyani sir. He has been my mentor, and I have seen him how he has taken Quality Council of India to a next level, including introduction of NAPH. Sir, my first question to you: where do you see the industry heading? And we would like to know more about your efforts in coordination with the government.
Okay. You see, healthcare industry has been in problem over past 3, 4, or even 5 years. This is largely, it has become due to the fact that more and more governments are coming forward with their populist scheme of providing healthcare to the citizens of the country. And that is a good sign. Out of the pocket expenditure is going to go down. It's already gone down. But the issue here is that government has no idea what is the cost of delivering healthcare for any particular procedure. So in the process, they fix up the cost of various procedures very irrationally. And that is going on since 2014. So on one hand, more patients are coming, but the margins are going down. And in fact, last year it happened almost that many hospitals were not able to sustain. We have seen hospitals being sold here and there. So that means healthcare industry is under constraint simply due to the fact of financial sustainability or unsustainability, let us call it. And with the COVID coming, obviously it is almost broken. To the extent that we will find very absolutely innovative approach now to in the COVID era and importantly in the post-COVID era. So now the issue here is simply that the healthcare industry has to be reborn. What we used to be talking, reimagining, actually the time has come now. We used to say that healthcare industry under disruption, actually it has disrupted already. So I think we have very intelligent people in the industry, and I'm sure we will be coming forward with a revised strategy. How do we take the industry forward? I'll be showing you 5, 6 slides later on when the discussion takes on. So this is my initial thing, unless you want me to show the slides right now.
Akash, you need to unmute.
Thank you, sir, for the
Zoom call.
And I would now like to go to Mr. Neeraj Lal. He has been at the forefront of managing a unique perspective, which is mother and child. I would like to know from him, what are his challenges and how did he manage such a unique aspect of mother and child focus in a particular hospital, because his hospitals are that way. And if he can share some success stories or any change in processes from his side.
Yeah, Akash. Hi. I represent Rainbow Children Hospitals and Birthright by Rainbow Hospitals. So we have 2 segments. One is children, second is mother. So around 60% business is contributed by children's and around 40% by mother part of healthcare. So in this time, last April, what we did, we have every week antenatal classes. So antenatal classes, these expected mother used to come to the hospital, and our team of doctors, which include physiotherapist and pediatrician and anesthetic, they used to come and give them yoga session. So now what we have done, we have used these webinars, and around every week we are talking to around 50 expectant mothers. And now also husbands are also joining them. So by sitting at their homes in different part of Bangalore and outside Bangalore, they used to come on the session. And now I've seen number of queries has gone up. Now we are 4 sessions in a particular month. Now we are doing more than 4 sessions a month. So our clientele from the Birthright point of view stay intact. Second part, what we are trying to do, vaccination. For the first 2 weeks, we are not having vaccination. Generally, we do around 100+ vaccination per day. So we have tied up with a CAP service which used to bring these parents along with the vaccination for a newborn vaccination here, and they're taking vaccination here. So this every day around 10 to 15 visits are doing. Within 10 to 5 kilometers, they go and bring the patients here, and the vaccination has been done. We are in touch with our all referral base. Most of the neonates, 600 gram, 800 gram, used to come from different part of Bangalore. So now most of the clinic is closed. So all these babies are coming to our hospitals. So, if you see, we got one of the biggest neonatal ICU in the country with 55 beds. So most of the doctors clinic and hospitals closed. We used to do around 7,000 fetal scans. So we have done these things. Like most of the important thing which we are connecting with the patient. Our referral base of the doctors from close by states and all is done through our webinar session, and we are in touch with them. Some of the hospital in Bangalore has been made as a COVID hospital, like ISRO and H. So all these patients are coming to our hospital. Since we maintain our pediatrics and neonates as well as mother children, so we are still doing around 60% of the business in this month. So that's all for me from the mother and child part of healthcare.
So Neeraj, if you can wait a little while, I have more questions for you, but I would like to now immediately switch over to Dr. Desai. He has been an amazing mentor to me, and I would like Dr. Desai to give an amazing insight on the flexibility of design aspect, keeping in mind now the COVID aspect. I think a lot of people, nursing home owners and hospital owners, or people who are planning hospitals, would like to know how people or the planners for the hospital now should keep in mind what is going to happen. Dr. Desai, over to you.
Right. Thanks, Akash, for the question. I think this is the first time that we are moving away from, a lot of technology which used to come into hospital design, because infectious diseases actually were not so much, in vogue. We were more looking at, technology-driven industries like cardiology or, oncology, other things. And suddenly you are now faced with a very simple viral infection, and, we are not knowing how to deal with this problem now. So let's look at it this way. And there are 3 stages, of treating this, and this probably will stay with us after it goes also, say in next 3 months or 6 months, whenever it goes. Is that one is we were not used to quarantine at all. We never thought that we will need something like that. So we will need in future to think quickly as to how to convert a hospital from a quaternary care or a tertiary care hospital into a hospital which can take large number of patients. So you will need to very quickly change certain areas. Like, for example, your dining halls will need to change into a quarantine ward, or you may have to very quickly convert a parking in your basement or on upper floors into a isolation ward for all that matters. You have to very quickly ramp up your intensive care unit, because this is where critical care, and Bombay probably has that kind of a problem now, that we don't know if it really becomes a New York in Bombay. How are you going to treat those patients who will need critical care? So all of a sudden we are now faced with a problem that how do you do this? So I think in future hospitals will need to be more flexible in the way that you design the hospital. And in that, the main thing is the grid of the columns that you take. So as much bigger the grid that you will take, as much easier will it be for you to make these functions change. So flexibility and modularity of hospital design, which was missed out, is now going to come into very big focus. You will need to be flexible in the way you change. When you are doing that, every interval, you will need to probably plan out for services. Services means when you are running your oxygen, pipings, or your air conditioning ducts, or your, reverse osmosis plants for providing dialysis bedside, because organ failure will also happen in a lot of these cases which are there, is all going to come in now. That you will need to, whether you like it or you don't like it, you should plan for it, that if it happens like this, then how do you very quickly convert? Even outpatient clinics are now getting converted into positive isolation rooms. So the critical thing in this is because it is infectious disease, you need to bring in negative pressure of air. So negative pressure of air means it need not be air conditioned space per se. You need to put an exhausting system in a manner that it sucks out more air than it pushes in the air. So even a non-air conditioned space actually can become a isolation ward kind of a situation. Only thing is you need to give it a negative pressured air. So that is something. So even nursing homes can convert into this kind of hospitals in no time actually. But the most important point here is it's a simple thing that 80% of these patients, when they will progress into positivity, they will need oxygen bedside. So when we were called at say Seven Hills to review the engineering, the first thing we said was we need to ramp up this hospital in terms of providing a oxygen connectivity bedside on the 1500 beds that have been planned in that hospital. So that's one very critical thing. Every bed, I think, in future will need oxygen connection. Currently what we used to do was in wards between two beds you give one oxygen. Probably in future it won't happen like that. You will have to probably plan a oxygen suction bedside in each of these beds, because later to add on becomes a little bit difficult, or at least the plant size will have to be sized in a manner which way. The other thing is this has shown that there will need to be a lot of technology intervention which will happen. Robotics, which has never been in practice in India, suddenly we are now facing how to serve medicine. I had a pilot friend of mine who was admitted in a hospital in Mumbai, and he was saying that the ward boy was so scared of him, he was still suspect. He was throwing the medicine to him, he was not even trying to hand over or give him in some manner. He was just throwing that medicine. So these kinds of things are probably going to come in. So you will need a robot, which is going to serve you probably your meal, like that. There'll be certain innovations in design which will happen, that no touch kind of a consultation method, that Kerala actually showed after they very quickly adopted from South Korea, that how from a glass wall, you can extend your arms, and now that technique has been followed in many other places.
You even mentioned about how
you're at a distance and you are trying to manage things. So this was never there before. Yeah, and the other thing which probably is so much required in this is the operation rooms and other things which are probably not there, but they will also be required. And bronchoscopy probably, we have not reached that stage yet, but bronchoscopy is an important thing of treating COVID patients. A very good laboratory. Suddenly we found that most of our hospitals are not equipped, so to test such kind of patients, isn't it? So that was suddenly from one lab. Now we have come up to 200 labs. So diagnostics probably will be ramped up, for infectious diseases, because this is not the end of it. And very, sure that there is a COVID-20 and COVID-21 that might, recur in future.
Yeah. Thank you so much for those insights. I think during our discussions, you even told us that how parking lots in Surat were getting converted into quarantine spaces.
Yes, parking lots, exhibition grounds, schools. I mean, we've looked at 7,500 rooms of Mumbai IIT to be converted into, wards if required for isolation of patients, because you don't need actually a very high-tech air conditioning system to manage that. You just have to, exhaust the air, and there you are. Not a problem. So yeah.
Thank you so much for your insights. I would like to now go to Joy. Joy is amazingly popular as a young leader, and a lot of people follow him running a major hospital like Hinduja. We were having very interesting discussions yesterday. I would really like him to touch upon his experience in coordination with BMC and local authorities, and how charity hospitals are taking or bracing for impact in this situation, and what can the other charity hospitals expect to be just few months ahead. Joy, over to you.
Thank you, Akash, and thanks to Medica Bazaar for inviting me. And special thanks to Akash by branding me as a young leader. So I don't know what is my age. Thanks for that. So, I wanted to tell this, and that is the reason I touched upon yesterday. the kind of work what is happening in Mumbai, because the challenge is also higher in Mumbai in comparison to other cities, where we are required to have some sorts of uh, coordination between different agencies. And I must say that whether it is private healthcare provider, public healthcare provider, services like BST, services like police, everyone has been brought under one umbrella, and they are working in a coordinated way. And can you imagine that where you have a disaster management cell in the city which is keeping track of beds availability of private and government hospital, and then getting their patients allotted to some of these beds. Can you imagine where Book My Show has been roped into the system, and they are creating the entire database and managing these sorts of allocation? Even dialysis centers, independent hospitals who are specialized for the maternity or pediatrics, all of them are now working towards a single cause, that how do you manage better and efficiently in this situation of COVID. So there is a very nice to see the kind of coordination going on, but at the same time, each of these entities, and especially when I come from a not-for-profit charitable organizations like us, there are many hospitals in the Bombay who are having certain challenges, and I must say that all of us are trying our best to do. If you see, as some of the points were highlighted by Dr. Desai, in terms of hospital planning and zoning, maybe many of the old hospitals were not planned that well to manage the situation. But very quickly, most of the hospitals have identified, created zones, and there are popular terminologies now: green, orange, red zone. That is the kind of zoning has been created in hospitals, where the positive patient will go, where the suspects will go, and where the non-COVID patients are likely to be taken. That is happening beautifully. There is a multidisciplinary team, I must say, a team of doctors managing the so-called COVID patients. It may have experts from the pulmonology specialty, infectious disease, and at the same time, it is also getting support from the critical care unit, because though it is less, it is now projected around 10% to 12% of the positive patients in Mumbai are becoming so-called critical. Others, 80% are remaining asymptomatic. So there is a good kind of coordination is happening within the organization. Apart from that, the why all of us are at home because of lockdown, social distancing in the hospital, the SOPs have been made. How do you manage that less number of contacts amongst your employees with your patients? So solutions like teleconsultation, like telemedicines have been introduced, and in many cases we are seeing that patients are coming down in the hospitals. Instead of allowing them to mix up
I think we lost Joy out there. So while we wait for him to come back, I will switch over the discussion to Dr. Prakash. Dr. Prakash, you remember we were discussing on the
to
aspect.
get rid of the suspicion, but you are quite
Dr. Prakash, can you hear me?
Akash, I'm hearing you.
Yeah. So the question to you, Dr. Prakash, we lost Joy for a while. I'll go back to
no,
Joy
I'm
in a
back.
while
I'm
later.
back.
Yeah, Joy, I'll come
I'm
back to
back.
you. We lost you for a while. Let us talk to Dr. Prakash in the meantime. I'll come back to you after that. We lost you for almost half a minute out there. So Prakash, first question to you, and warm welcome to the Medica Talks. And it's an honor to have you, MD of Star Health, You've added a lot of value to this panel. My question to you first, whether the existing policy, does it cover COVID or not? And if not, what are the additional aspects do you think people need to buy, etc.? This is the first question which everybody has in this mind, whether my insurance is going to cover COVID or not. Second, please do share the numbers of the insurance industry in terms of how much claims have been settled and not settled, etc. And then we can move on to the last question.
Hello, Akash. Very good afternoon, and thanks to Medica Bazaar for organizing this panel discussion. But Akash, you thought of me when you lost joy. Next time, please think of insurance when you think of joy. You know, insurance is supposed to restore joy, not to replace joy.
Basically, Dr. Prakash, you have to have joy before taking insurance.
With regard to this COVID-19, as it was pointed by the previous speaker also, we thought it is seasonal, but now it is proving to be perennial. And somebody said if there is not COVID-19, there's going to be COVID-20, COVID-21. So all these talks, I have a feeling that it's going to boost the need for health insurance in the years to come. I want to just say here, Akash, you rightly asked me, health insurance, is it available for COVID-19? Please make a note that if somebody has got a health insurance policy with them, automatically they are covered for COVID-19, because COVID-19 is like any infection. When somebody has an insurance policy and they suffer from influenza infection or a bacterial infection or a fungal infection, it is not the botheration of the insurance to know what type of infection it is. When somebody has an insurance policy and unfortunately they fall prey to COVID-19, it is 100% covered. So what is covered is an indemnity. Indemnity is the expenses that are incurred for the treatment of that admission from end to end. Whatever is covered is the indemnity coverage. It is eligible for all people who have an insurance. Only thing is, all people who have an insurance, only ask yourself, do you have insurance coverage or do you have adequate insurance coverage? Adequate insurance coverage meaning, like I know most of my customers I see, when they are pushed into respiratory ward, high dependency unit or intensive care management, just requiring high flow nasal oxygen, not even ventilatory support. And when they stay for 10 to 12 days, usually we pay a bill of around 10 to 15 lakhs. So it's so expensive. So what the insurance coverage should transform into adequate coverage, meaning individuals should have at least 5 to 10 lakhs coverage. In India, if you see 48 crore people have some form of coverage, 36 crore is covered by government, 12 crore is paid by retail and group policies. And in this 12 crore, unfortunately, 65% of them have an insurance coverage less than 4 lakhs, 3 lakhs. So the time for us to move into adequate coverage, and if you have an insurance policy, you are covered for COVID-19. But what are these COVID-19 policies which are sold in the market these days? They are the policies called benefit policies. If somebody, maybe you have some 50 healthcare employees and you are worried will any of them fall prey to the disease, you can take a benefit policy where you need to pay a very small amount. For example, we have a policy where you have to pay some 918 rupees, just 918 rupees, and cover your person. If at all they are hospitalized and admitted and diagnosed with COVID-19, immediately they pay a lump sum of 42,000. So these are all benefit policies where the insurance companies are coming forward to give a benefit cover. Upon diagnosis, they pay a lump sum. So this is what is covered now with regard to coverage. Akash, you are asking about the numbers. I can tell you the industry, we have a reporting, we see that, close to 840 cases of positive confirmed COVID-19 is sort of the overall health insurance industry received claims, close to 840 claims. But what is very important and pertinent is in Star Health Insurance, we have got around 357 COVID-related claims. Under the ICD coding, you have U07.1, U07.2. Means the confirmed cases 0.07.1 and suspected cases 0.7.2. Because some cases, the specificity and sensitivity of the RT-PCR is still 60 to 70%. So there are false negatives, and there are cases which are suspected, where they are waiting for the test. So we have, in our experience, see that around out of the 357 claims related to COVID that we have got a pre-authorization request, 111 are positive for COVID and 246 are suspected cases. So 2.5-fold. So if you look at this, the numbers, whatever we see in the media, 2.5-fold are people who are suspected. What are these suspected cases? They are yet to be proved or they could not be proved. The treatment, the quarantine, whatever evaluation, everything is the same as confirmed cases. What the media shows and what we are talking about is only the confirmed cases. But in my experience, I have found that out of the 357 claims that we have got from different hospitals across the country, 111 is confirmed claim COVID and 246 is suspected COVID. And this 111 is out of the 840 for the industry. Obviously, we have close to 12 to 13% of the market share. So naturally, here also we have 12 to 13% of that. Only one thing I want to say important. What is important to the industry is, Dr. Giridhar Gyani, I have a lot of respect for him. He very beautifully said that the cost is increasing and time for nursing homes and the hospitals to achieve sustainability. To further, I'm a medical person in the insurance sector. My heart bleeds for those of my colleagues, my own classmates, my own friends who have a hospital, small size nursing home, and who are finding it difficult to sustain in this context. So we are with such hospitals, although the COVID-related claims, the amount compared to the communicable disease, whatever we pay an average, COVID, we pay around 2.5 to 3-fold more. Around 2.5 to 3-fold more for COVID-related, in COVID-related claims. And in this, close to 30 to 35% is all protective equipment, biomedical waste, nurse handling charges, COVID-related cost. So here, as I spoke about the coverage and the cost, the next thing is, I'll follow up with Akash's next question.
Please refer to our interesting discussion sometime back. You said that a lot is up to the hospitals to help make this all work out. You have a message for the hospitals? You spoke about standardization of costs and costs related to PPE kit. Maybe you can elaborate on that.
This Akash, in fact, there are a lot of experts around. There are people who are managing the hospital. There are people who have invested on the hospitals. There are people who are struggling to retain their manpower in the hospitals. So I would rather love to hear from them on what do you expect from insurance companies. We expect only one thing. What we expect is standardization of the cost. The same hospital for the same diagnosis. Sometimes it is very unfortunate, and I'm finding it very difficult to explain my audit team when there are differential costs for the same diagnosis in the same hospital, probably for the same type of accommodation. From our end, from insurance end, I can guarantee one thing: we can speed up the payment. I know every hospital will be like in cash deficit, so we can help to speed up the payment. We can try to our office premises, which used to have 1,000 people in one complex. Now hardly there are 60, 70 people, skeletal people working. Most of us are working from home. The dynamics and culture of our operations have totally changed. Our marketing is happening through a digital procurement strategy. And we are trying to enhance the customer experience through online and digital support. So we are willing to accept the pre-authorization request or the total bill from the hospitals, this can be submitted online, and we are willing to effect payment based on online submission. Erstwhile, we were looking at, we were insisting on submission of the real documents, the originals. Here for hospitals, pending receipt of all the documents, original documents, based on electronic submission, we are willing to fasten the payment. In fact, morning I had a Zoom call with my team. I was just trying to tell them, how can we make the payment 3 days, 3 working days after complete submission of documents? How can we give the approval within 1 hour after raising a pre-authorization request? So to that extent, we are also trying to place technology and enhance the expertise in our manpower and see that how we can speed up the paying process. From our end, without any delay, without much hassle, how we can pay your claims. From your end, how can we all stay together and arrive at some standardization? These are the expectations.
Thanks, sir. I'll come back to you again at the end of the panel discussion. A lot of people would have a lot of questions. Now I'd like to move to Dr. Deepak Baid. He is president of the Association of Medical Consultants. I know he has almost 12,000 postgraduate doctors in the city of Greater Mumbai who are part of this association, and more than 1,500 nursing homes he manages. He's a big fan of Dr. Prakash, and he had certain things to say about insurance. He will discuss that. But my main question to Dr. Deepak Baid, how the nursing home industry, say that sector, is coping up with the COVID situation? What is your coordination with the BMC and other local authorities, and what do you think should be the next step? Maybe you also spoke about labs when I was discussing with you. Maybe what are you doing for labs, etc. You spoke about some Google Drive, etc., which the doctors can talk about all these things which a lot of audiences here would like to know. Over to you, Dr. Deepak Baid.
There's lots and lots to be said about this, but I'll just say like that, we are doctors. And as nursing home owners, it has become very sad when we can't see our own patients without being on mask. The personalized touch has gone away. We have gone through a lot of experiences of HIV when it first came inside, and we used to actually put the patient of HIV in a room and not even go inside the room. Then we came across H1N1 around 10, 12 years back. And H1N1 also, there was a fear psychosis, hospitals used to not admit. And then later on, it turned out after a few years together, we started admitting H1N1 in special rooms separately, and the fear went away. But it's the first time in our life we have seen an infection of this sort, which is so infectious, which has not been with HIV, which has not been with H1N1. And it has actually created a barrier between us as doctors with the patient. A doctor and a patient both are wearing masks. We are not allowed to touch the patient without gloves. And this is not the way we would like to work. And hope the situation changes. Now, as nursing homes, yes, it was taken off guard. Suddenly the thing came in. We as nursing home owners were not used to it. We don't have any system of triaging. We have small nursing homes catering to the local population. People just walk in a crowd, and they just have a single owner or a multiple doctors are there in the setup. And there's a huge crowd. And this type of differentiation and separation and social distancing was not heard of. Similar thing happened in clinic levels. And this is what happened. The fear psychosis came in immediately. Doctors got infected. The fear psychosis went to the staff. The staff got infected, or even those who didn't get infected were scared, worried. They came from local population, the slums. The staff are coming from slums and societies, and the local societies and the slums started debarring them, started outcasting them, started even telling them that don't go to hospitals. So hospitals started having difficulty in getting their staff. The doctors were worried to come and see the patient in the hospital. Our doctors are very senior doctors, about 60 years, 55 with comorbidity. So there was a huge setback. Because of the lockdown, patients were not coming to the hospital. So no patients, no staff, no doctors. And invariably the hospitals were closed down. As time went by, the fear psychosis reduced. There were a lot of hospital news coming in that time, corporate hospitals getting infected, because the concept of infection control was just coming up. It was just new. Then we realized the type of PPE to be worn, the type of precaution to be taken, infection control to be taken. Gradually, the staff got some kind of motivation. Gradually, the government came in, telling the staff, telling the society to please allow, motivated the healthcare workers and the population to help and treat them as heroes, because we are actually fighting a war. And that's how slowly, gradually, the healthcare system is again falling in place. Staff are coming in, doctors have come back, they resume duty. As far as financial brunt is concerned, yes, this season from Jan to March, where SAB is a system where we do have problems. The numbers are much lesser, but lockdown definitely affected the hospitals. But we usually have a backup plan. We usually take care of our own self. What is necessary is to take care of our staff as a family, motivate them, and take care of them. The fear psychosis and all has gradually come down as more and more facilities have come up. Now, what do we have? What is the improvement is we have ourselves developed our own system of triaging, which was not comparable with the corporates. We have made it to such an extent that we have at the entrance, we kept a stool, and that is a triaging. Patients are screened at the level of the entrance, not like a corporate where we have a separate department and all, because our hospitals in Bombay are very small. Then the entire concept of universal precaution went to a toss. The HIV kit suddenly became of no use. The mask which is worn in the OT, suddenly people get infected because it's a porous mask. So the entire universal precaution had again reevaluated, and we have to restudy the entire thing. But what came out winning was the dedication of the staff. Now, as far as insurance is concerned, yes, today, as Prakash sir said, benefit policy is not easily available for medical people. If we go on and ask the insurance company, out of 10, 1% will come out with the insurance for doctors. Unfortunately, they may have insurance for the public, but not for doctors. And more so when we are trying to negotiate with them, one of the insurance companies said those that treating COVID patient will not be given. This type of demarcation is not acceptable. We have to have respect for the people who are treating the COVID patients. And to attune that, for a 2 lakh policy, the charges are 9,000 for 6 months and 1 year. And this we have to help them. We have to help people come forward. Now, luckily, the government has come forward. The insurance policy has become of 50 lakh rupees and free treatment and all the things come forward. It's a lucky thing the government has come forward. We would have expected that from the insurance company. Then, what is improved? And what may help in the future? One, government is ultimately spending money on the healthcare. We will come out of this in a beautiful manner, that there will be better infrastructure for the government. There'll be better improvement in the health structuring. There'll be better hierarchy of centers, like we have the primary healthcare, the tertiary healthcare and all. And maybe things will improve like that. Digitalization of healthcare will come in a bigger way. Now, as Prakash sir said, if we could possibly do the digitalization of the medical records and send it to insurance, nothing like it. I had a doctor admitted who was COVID positive. He had a difficult time because he could not sign on the documents. His family were quarantined. They could not sign on documents. And then it became difficult to get the insurance passed. Ultimately, he had to spend from his pocket and go. There was reimbursement. The cashless did not take place, just simply because he could not sign on documents and his entire family was quarantined. What else? The manufacturing capacity of the country will improve, hopefully, the way things are going on. And that's
Dr. Deepak, I would like to interject out here. Amazing points. I think Dr. Prakash will have a lot to say in the end. I would now like to go to Mr. Bijon Misra. He's professor and a great consumer activist. I would like to invite him now. Let us hear his perspective. I think he will have certain things to say about insurance. Maybe Dr. Prakash in the end can club all the relevant queries and concerns and maybe speak in the end about it. But Professor Bijon Misra, I invite you to please come and speak. Over to you, sir.
Akash, thanks a lot. You know, it's really nice to be with my friends. I thank Medica Bazaar for inviting me in the lockdown too. I'm able to meet my friends at least virtually. So hi to all and good afternoon to all the participants who have joined us to listen. Well, I would start saying that with this, it has actually, the COVID-19 pandemic has triggered all what we have been shouting from the top of the roof for the last 10 years, that government needs to spend more in healthcare. And that has actually compelled the government, this has compelled the government to spend more and look at how they need to engage themselves in terms of tackling emergencies and this kind of pandemic which has happened has actually woken them up and shaken them up in terms of they could see that the infrastructure was lacking and they were not prepared, and the healthcare was not to that level where we as end users or patient groups have been expecting government to go ahead and do. And we all know that if the private sector wasn't there, healthcare would have been in further doldrums in our country. You know, because of the private investment, at least we can see some dimension of quality healthcare made accessible to the citizens. Having said that, you see, what is most important is this has actually triggered a kind of an awareness in terms of quality. And it has triggered that there has to be an uniform standard. You know, I have been with QCI and NABH for a fairly long time. And all the time have been demanding that why are the hospitals not engaging in terms of getting themselves certified or accredited? And when it came to accreditation, I heard a lot of noise saying it's too high, it's not implementable, it's too expensive, we can't do it. Then we brought in a certification level called entry level. And now I hear that they want further to come down in terms of quality of standards. But we as end users, we of course know that nobody can conduct business in this country, including a private practitioner, without a license. We are all governed under a law. We are all governed under some kind of a licensing policy where every institution has to be ratified in terms of standards. So when you get a license and you have a standard, then where is it that, what is that which stop from not getting you certified? And that is what builds trust within the end users and the patients, and also helps in terms of also insurance companies. Like I heard just now in the conversation when it came that even Girdhar Gyani ji mentioned that even the government doesn't know what is the cost. Now, if you don't have a standard, naturally we will not be able to get to the cost. So we have to understand how do we differentiate or define standard in terms of various healthcare institutions or providers. And without that, I don't think we would be able to move much. And that is why we are all the time trying to figure out all hospitals as much as possible, including, you know, regulators like IRDA brought out saying that if you get yourself at least entry level certified, then you can go in for cashless facility. Otherwise your cashless facility will stop. And every time I hear that the date has got extended because people are not yet prepared, not ready, not gone through. And then again, when I talk to the institutions that what is the delay, they talk about, you know, QCI or NABH not being very end user friendly or not being very client friendly. And within NABH, I've been trying to understand that how do we become client friendly? How do we ensure that all hospitals find it easy, at least the basic fundamental, you know, in terms of quality care, you know, exists for the patients. And that is what we are looking at. And the most unfortunate thing which happened in COVID-19 was, you know, violence against healthcare providers, violence against healthcare workers. Now this, I remember way back, almost 10 years back, I worked with Indian Medical Association very closely to understand how do we address this issue of violence. And the only conclusion which came was that apart from technical people giving healthcare facilities, you need good counselors. You need people who are trained communicators. You need people in the healthcare delivery system who would be able to resolve disputes, not escalate them. not allow disputes to go to a level where, it is unmanageable. And of course, people who take the law in their own hand, we should sort of always, detest such things happening and talk against it. And government very rightly brought in an ordinance at the right time to demonstrate that we are all together and we won't like people who are criminal minded or who take violence in their hand to demean the good healthcare facilities and the workers in terms of delivery. And the last I would like to say in my opening remark is, there is a demand now coming up in terms of quality. Everybody who is in the healthcare delivery system would now be very, very attentive in terms of and alert in terms of understanding institutions which are following certain standards or not. Number two, the first thing we did when we went into a lockdown was all the telemedicine centers which were functional in our country were non-functional, the so-called functional telemedicine. So we made sure we brought clarity in terms of bringing guidelines on telemedicine, allowed patients to be in touch with their provider, allowed patients to be in touch with the medical practitioners, so that there was no breakdown in terms of communication. And I also heard today, it helped institutions to be in touch and to be in, so which was very good. And now we want to be sure that it gets more formalized and technology becomes an enabler in the healthcare delivery system. I'm sure in the coming years, India will see a lot of change in terms of healthcare, in terms of not only quality, but also ensuring safety, ensuring that we have better coverage in terms of healthcare products which are there under insurance. And as we all know, Ayushman Bharat is already going ahead in terms of certain areas of coverage, and not only coverage, also strengthening the primary healthcare system in our country, which is again, not in good shape. So the health and wellness centers, which are 1.5 lakhs, which has been identified, will work as good preventive, educative centers to enable citizens to stay healthy, and also enable citizens to be able to access healthcare at their doorstep.
Great,
we are looking at.
Yeah, great thought, sir. So before I come back to that panel again, I would like to take your views forward to Dr. Harshad Thakur, who is director at the National Institute of Health and Family Welfare. He has been working very closely with the government on the skilling aspect and the training aspect, which he can throw a lot of light upon, maybe touch upon your concerns which you mentioned. Over to you, Dr. Harshad Thakur. Welcome to the panel.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks, Dr. Akash, for inviting me. So I will just like to mention a few things about the government efforts in skilling and helping students as well as hospitals to be better prepared. So as you know, we have Disaster Management Act 2005, and under this, government has prepared 11 empowered groups. And there is a group number 4, which looks after augmenting human resources and capacity building. And this is under the leadership of Secretary MSME. And there are 4 key objectives. One is development of training resources for various categories of healthcare professionals. Then second is streamlining of communication with the states so that there is a better coordination to take updates, strengthen the training process. Third thing is to compile all the data at central level. And finally, develop an integrated training platform for all the states. So under this, we have IGOT. You must be aware about Integrated Government Online Training. So this IGOT has been developed to step up effort to fight the coronavirus pandemic. This is under DOPT website. And this is basically for training and capacity building of healthcare staff, whether public or private. And this is for doctors, nurses, paramedicals, local level hygiene workers, technicians, and even common man can access this platform. And there are various training programs under this IGOT portal. I will mention few like basics of COVID, use of PPE, quarantine, isolation, infection prevention and control strategies, management of COVID-19 cases, lab sampling and collection and testing, ICU care, ventilation. These are few examples. And next thing I would like to mention is post-COVID, what we can expect. So we can expect that among our healthcare workers, there will be better awareness. Of course, in community also, there will be better awareness about health and hygiene after this post-COVID, including students. Because of these online training programs, teaching programs, students now, I personally think that they will be more demanding. They will expect more from their trainers, teachers, because students will be well prepared about the topic in advance. Of course, they will be doing self-studies.
So I have one question for you, Dr. Thakur.
Yes.
The thing is, what I hear, but I don't notice, something which a lot of people did mention, even Professor Bijan mentioned. You look at the aspect of counseling as some skills which you can introduce, which I feel is necessary to improve, say bedside manners, or maybe improve the overall counseling aspect which can come in, which can help in actually reducing all the patient violence and all, because I think if there is a 360-degree approach in engaging with the patient and there is transparency, can the government and National Institute of Health and Family Welfare look at that very critically? Is that, can we make it a compulsory part, or maybe add some skills where these parts become a norm when you take care of patients? What is your take on that?
Yeah, you are right, Dr. Akash. We need counseling, and this COVID pandemic has underlined that. So obviously, we have a course on that also. And obviously, post-COVID, for each and every disease, for its prevention, control, and management, we require counseling not only for the patients, but for the patients' relatives, other healthcare and healthcare workers, and including common man. And as I was mentioning initially, that we'll be considering about more emphasis on online platform of training and teaching. So before this government might come out with norms for this online training, but we'll have to consider many things while planning and conducting these online courses. So one thing is capacity building of your own faculty and staff before you go outside, because you will require infrastructure, and your faculty staff should be well aware about what they are going to offer. Second thing is the course should be based on your learning objectives, which depends on the audience you are tackling with. So audience background, their need assessment is also important. And then we'll have to think about learners who will have weak online connections. So online connection is not ubiquitous in India. So there are a lot of issues. Then we'll have to have clear-cut rules about interaction while discussing online. And then we'll have to think about pre and post assessment, whether there is really any gain of the online training teaching program, and will require, obviously everyone will require a lot of practice to improve the quality of that particular thing. So I think post-COVID, we'll see entirely new way of teaching and training.
Thank you so much, sir, for your insights. Now, I've spoken to all the panelists. Now I'll be going back to Joy. We also lost him for a while, not philosophically, but literally. Joy, I really would like you to comment on the aspect of the new GIPSA, the new circular in which they have said that the hospitals have to charge as per the GIPSA rates and all. What is your take on that, and how is the hospital coping up? And what do you have to say where the charity and the corporate industry of the healthcare aspect is heading towards?
Akash, just to reiterate what Dr. Gyani has started with, that our healthcare expenses are going up every day. So even after that, I can tell that most of the private charitable hospitals, they try to retain their price, even if it is not for anything, it is just to remain competitive in the market. So charitable hospitals, they are doing their bit, and as you know, especially in Maharashtra, the charitable hospitals are governed by the High Court order where you need to keep 10% free bed and 10% at subsidized rate. We do all this. But 2 days back, when this order came from the government of Maharashtra to follow the GIPSA rate or the kind of lowest rate which has been signed up with any TPS, it was a little bit of surprising. But what we understood, that there are few complaints against some of the hospitals about charging excessively high, and if we really need to follow that, it will be really difficult for a hospital like ours to maintain, manage and sustain in this environment, and especially if you really need to give the quality care as Mr. Vijan Mishra was mentioning about. So what we have done, we have started dialoguing with the government, with the authorities, to come to a some sorts of a situation solution which remains win-win for all of us. You have to understand and agree, running a hospital is not a very easy task. In the government hospital, when it is given free of cost, definitely it is free for the patient, but government needs to get that fund from the taxpayer money and from the other sources, but that is not there for the private hospitals. So we are there to support COVID patient. We are there to ensure that nobody get hassles just at the time of paying the patient bill, but at the time of at the end of the day, we also need to see that how we can remain sustainable in this competitive market. So it has come, but we are hopeful that soon there will be an amicable solution between the hospitals and the authorities.
Thanks, Joy. Thanks so much. I'm coming back to Dr. Gyani again for just small insight which I want from him. Dr. Gyani sir, आपको क्या लग रहा है कितना लॉस हुआ है इंडस्ट्री के अंदर एंड व्हाट इज द इंडस्ट्री हेडेड टुवर्ड्स? आपको क्या लग रहा है गवर्नमेंट किस तरह से हमें हेल्प कर रही है और AHPI का किस तरह से, हाउ डू यू थिंक AHPI is helping its members or patrons and its member hospitals? What do you think the next 1 year is going to be like?
On this front, all the industry associations have been working together. In fact, EY carried out a study and it showed that in the month of March itself, the loss to the entire industry, hospital industry I'm talking, was 4,000 crores. And that was the assumption that if the occupancy is 35%, that was actually the case. And if the 20%, they estimated the loss to 7,000 crores per month. You must be knowing that already the major hospital chains, sometimes they allow openly tell or otherwise they don't tell. They have introduced the graded pay cut at the senior level and the junior. So that is what is happening at the level. We have succeeded in convincing through Mr. C.K. Mishra, who issued the order to Ministry of Defense and to the Ministry of Health to release the outstanding. And some reasonable amount of money has come, to the industry. In fact, I wish that person like Prakash should be made next time in charge for CGHS and ECHS, and a friendly, industry-friendly person, so that I think if there is a power in me, I will make him in charge of CGHS and ECHS. That is one. Second component here is that we also have told the government that at least to begin with, give us the money which is due to industry, which includes the outstanding from the PSUs, CGHS, ECHS, ESI, and also the private insurance company. IRDA actually is working on it, and Dr. Prakash was the first to respond very favorable to this. The TDS, a lot of money is outstanding, we are not getting the income tax return. If this money comes to industry, we estimated that we can run the industry for next 2 months, So that means this doesn't require any extra approval from the government. It is our own money, industry money, they have to just give. Then we gave them 2 more suggestions. One was that in this difficult time, the PF contribution and ESI contribution for the employee can be waived off for 3 months, which will give us 17% relief into the pay bill of the pupil. And that other was GST. So these are the only 2 things we wanted extra favor, waive of the GST for 3 months waive of the PF and ESI contribution for 3 months. I think government is working on it, and something hopefully will come out. And I also will quote what Dr. Deepak was mentioning. In fact, this is my greatest worry. I have noticed in past 2 weeks, that our friends, when they are treating patients, they are fighting 2 battles. One is to save themselves, another battle is to save the patient. It should never happen. It should never happen. And what he was saying very correctly, we have dealt with HIV, H1N1, but this fear actually which has gone into, the reason is very simple. We have not been able to come out and give confidence to our healthcare workers. We do not have the very unified and unquestionable guidelines on how to deal with this when you treat what PPEs, what infection control, what environment conditions should be there. If this confidence can be given, I will like our healthcare workers to be fully dedicated to the patient. And I think what Deepak was mentioning, that this has started happening, and I think it should start happening wide across. And last from my side is that the future of healthcare is going to be difficult. The healthcare leadership has never, faced this kind of situation. The CEOs will have to do a greater role to motivate the teams in time to come. I was speaking to your friend, Dr. Narayani, the other day. I asked her that there was a newspaper in the news that in 40s there has been no infection among the doctors and nurses. I asked her, what is the magic you have done? Her answer was very honest. She said, we are doing the normal infection control practices, what we do under NABH. Only thing is, she gave credit to their teamwork. That the doctors, nurses, they discuss things with themselves. That gives them the confidence to face the situation. And finally, I think people have said that future is going to be technology-based. Teleconsultation will start. Home health will start. I think all hospitals will have vertical like home health. Wearable will also come into the picture. So I think these some of the things. And finally, I think the smaller hospitals also will come in. And one last line is my favorite line, which I keep saying. India had a opportunity to provide workforce to the entire world. Allied healthcare is the short supply across the world. We have so much population. Unfortunately, even today, we do not have the paramedical council in the country. So we do not have any credential and privileging framework for these people. Everybody is training its own way. I think this, if we can do it post-COVID, I think we can really be, the leader in the world to supply the health workers the way Cuba supplies doctors to the USA. I think these are from my side. Hopefully, I think the panel, which is so brilliant panel. Yeah.
Thanks, sir. Now I'll be taking audience questions, which have come. Amazing number of questions which have come on Facebook and on the Zoom meeting. I'll take the question. I'll take first question of Mr. Agarwal Bharat. I think he's a nursing home owner, and he says that many of their staff is still not attending due to fear, and that makes it impossible to run small nursing homes. I think I'll put this question to Deepak, Dr. Deepak Baid. I was discussing on the same line yesterday with him. I'll also put this question to Joy, both of them. Deepak can start and Joy can end that. What do you think the nursing home owners or hospital owners should do to make sure that the staff come back? Dr. Deepak and then Dr. Joy, and then Joy.
First and foremost, lead with an example. If you're there in the front line, you'll find all your staff standing by you. Second thing, you have to even take care of the staff's family. You have to talk to them. You have to talk to them about motivation, about the infection control, the fear of PPE, the concept of PPE. It has been changing, evolving with time. Earlier, the PPE was like entire suit has to be worn of the PPE. Thereafter, the concept came out of N95. And now there's a further dilution of a 3-ply mask. So a lot of things are changing and evolving. But what is necessary is to remove the fear of the staff. One, if the staffs are fearful, the doctors are fearful, you will not be able to work out. And you have to lead with an example. You have to stand by them, and then only the fear of the staff will go away.
I remember, Dr. Deepak, you mentioning that you created a rota system where 1 week for 12 hours each your staff works and then another week they don't work. I think that was well appreciated by your staff. Joy, do you have anything like that which you can cite as an example where you feel that the staff is motivated to come and work in the front line? Joy.
So the first thing what we did, by almost third week of March, we created a roster and we ensured, because of the reduced workload in the hospital, we started asking people and calling people only when they are required. And that gave them some sorts of confidence that I am going to get adequate amount of, less exposure in comparison to other time. And they started coming probably 2 or 3 days in a week and working for the regular 8-hour shift. Then subsequently what we did, we started providing them the comfort what they are looking for at this time. For example, to give them facilities like pick up and drop. So we arrange, and you will be surprised to know the kind of routes and all we created for our staff. Thirdly, what we did, as Dr. Deepak Ved was talking about, the fear. So it is not the management who is going and telling, because if you ask me frankly, we may not have adequate evidence-based knowledge to say what is right and what it is not. But we have asked our infection control team to justify department-wise, area-wise, the kind of PPE our employees should use and why they are using this. Then we have done something like, what we have not done before. We have different WhatsApp group where we have even got the junior most staff in the organization roped in, and they can directly access the topmost management by sharing their fear or anything they need. If somebody is feeling, I am not feeling okay and well, conducting tests, doing the screening. If somebody needs, even if their family friend, some sorts of, screening or test, if they have shown symptoms, that has been conducted by the hospital. So we have taken a lot of these measures to ensure that we are there to protect you, not to push you in the challenging environment and they face some sorts of challenge.
Great. There are a lot of questions from the insurance perspective, Dr. Prakash. The common question that is coming in, how many claims have you settled? I think you already mentioned that. But what people want to know is there any way the healthcare workers, the workforce from the healthcare side, can get some kind of a leverage from the government, any policies which are coming in where the insurance companies can actually address that? Not necessarily what Star is also already doing, but an insurance perspective which can, get away from their fear factor that they are covered even if they don't have adequate insurance.
Akash, it is not just a fear factor. Historically, the experience is whenever healthcare workers are covered, insurance companies have gone into huge losses. So that is the apprehension to come forward and cover healthcare workers. Our personal data also shows 150 to 160% outgo. If we collect 10 crores, we end up spending 16 crores because the outgo is usually high when there is a group insurance that covers the healthcare workers. Now, after hearing to my panelist, I'm not talking here as a managing director. I want to be as a common man. In the interest of my healthcare workers, where I was basically a clinician for 20 years, I was a healthcare worker. I worked in Singapore during the SARS outbreak. So I know the trouble, the anxiety and other things. What I want to say is, we have to talk to the Insurance Regulatory Development Authority of India, and we have to come forward with some type of healthcare cover for the frontline workers as a CSR activity, not as an insurance business. Insurance business will be very difficult. Companies will shy away. They will be scared of their losses. End of the day, they have to meet their board. But we cannot leave behind these frontline workers. What we should do is, for the frontline workers, we should come forward with a health insurance cover from the corporate social responsibility of the insurance companies. As a profit-making company, every corporate is spending on CSR. Why can't this CSR be spent on covering the frontline workers who are trying to fight the disease for the sake of our country and their people? So I think it should be, I'm going to talk to IRDA after this webinar. I'm going to talk to IRDA, and I want to find some means by which we can come forward with a cover for frontline workers under the directions of IRDA, so that any hospital that proposes to cover their frontline worker, no insurance can deny. If there is an order from IRDA, no insurance can deny, and health insurance cover for frontline workers can be made available.
Great, great. So some people are again asking you specifically, is PPE kit covered in insurance, and how do you bring about better transparency in the system so that, you know, ultimately patients benefit?
The patient has to be benefited, and our colleagues in the healthcare ecosystem have to be protected. So naturally PPE has to be paid. I cannot say that I will not pay for PPE. It will be very inhuman. PPE has to be paid, but only thing is, can we all arrive at a common price? There are hospitals charging 5,600, 6,500, and there are vendors telling me that it is available for 500 to 750. So let us arrive at the common price for PPE in this country and the number of PPEs that may be required. If there are 5 patients in the ward and one healthcare worker is going to use 1 PPE, is he going to charge from all the 5 patients or divide that cost between the 5 patients? So I want the forum to come forward with a suggestion where we can see, instead of somebody else forcing on us on the standardization, why can't we be proactive? Come forward and tell that, look, my dear insurers, this is the cost and this is the number. If a person stays for 5 days, and if I need a PPE for my doctor or my nurse and my paramedical person, okay, you give me 5 into 315 for 5 days, and for this you charge me so much. It is fair enough. But some hospitals, we see that the bill for all these PPE and biomedical waste and nurse handling charges is almost 40 to 45% of the overall bill. So maybe Akash, you can help the forum to come forward with I'm willing to implement from tomorrow. I'm willing to implement from tomorrow, and I'm willing to talk to all my colleagues, CEOs from other insurance companies. There should be a fair arrangement. But today, insurers are cursing the hospitals and the hospitals are cursing the insurance companies. Why can't we synergize and progress?
Can Dr. Desai comment on this? I think he had a perspective some time back on this. Desai, sir.
I've been hearing on this cost versus price, I think it started with Dr. Bed when he was talking. I think we need to progress towards a system, and Dr. Prakash probably would know it better, to a system which is like a resource-based relative value system. RVS has started in the United States. Because otherwise what happens is, like, what a nursing home costs are will never compare to a cost of, a Hinduja hospital. So if a protocol of, say, Apollo or Fortis says that a PPE needs to be changed every 2 hours in a critical care unit, then the cost of that PPE is going to be higher. If they are hiring, say, trained intensivist versus, the family-owned nursing home, then the trained intensivist will need to be costed separately, because the price will be relative to the cost. A 3 Tesla MRI versus a 0.5 Tesla MRI cannot be sold at 5,000 rupees. It cannot be done like that. So that is the problem what insurance companies generally face. We had once in Bombay tried to do this for IRDA, where a nursing home cost based on which a pricing model could be developed versus a cost and a price of a hospital which is a 300 bedder like a Choice Hospital. It will be very different in terms of its costing. So pricing will also need some kind of a gradation. Now I don't know whether insurance companies in India are able to do that. It's simple, like, if you go to say a very top shot lawyer, versus a youngster, there's a difference, no? So it's always going to be the infrastructure also. So nursing homes operate in a 300 or 250 square feet per bed kind of infrastructure, versus an Apollo or a Hinduja, which operates out of 800 to 1000 square feet per bed. So they have paid, that much more for the infrastructure. Their quality of human resource is that much, different. The way they, provide hospitality services is very much different. The employee to per bed cost of a medium-sized hospital versus a Apollo, or a Fortis, which will be like 6 or 7 employees per bed, against a 3 employee per bed of a smaller facility. So that costing and pricing are two different things, and we need to arrive at that very quickly, like how you have in hotels, a 3-star and a 5-star. The cost, structure and pricing structure is different. So I think we need to do that.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So I'll be concluding this event right now, and I'll be just asking one last question, and everybody's just is requested to answer that particular thing, and it will be a mix of things. Some questions to some other people, but I would like you to answer them after the.
Can't hear you.
Akash, you have trailed off.
Yeah. It is showing that network bandwidth is low.
I think we lost Akash.
Yeah, we have lost Akash.
Yeah.
Don't say that.
Yeah.
Dr. Prakash, I will tell you, when I saw Vivek, maybe Narendra Modi, our network.
We should do that, sir. Right.
Yeah, he is saving, expenses on shaving.
So this is my final MBBS, where I had not shaved for 3 months.
Good. Looks good on you.
I think we can close maybe. It is already been.
Yeah, we passed.
Now.
I think we all, it's nice to meet you all. Namaskar.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to all of you.
Akash has come back. Oh, we lost him again.
Thank you all. It was a lovely panel. Thank you all. And I couldn't hear what Dr. Desai and others said in the end, but it was an amazing discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.